Hi everyone, I'm Sheena Brady, the founder and CEO of Tease Tea and the Founders Fund. And if you're not aware of what the Founders Fund is, in 2019 it was a give back program under Tease Tea, and that basically helped to support women entrepreneurs across the country gain access to mentorship, resources, and funding for their business. In 2020 we decided to take our goals to the next level and help create the Founders Fund as its own social enterprise, and it's completely supported by our funders, our mentors, as well as our members, of course. And so in celebration of International Women's Week, specifically on the theme of equality and women's rights, we are trying to tie that theme into the women's entrepreneurship space. And so with that, I'm so happy to have these incredible women here who represent the Founders Fund in all three capacities that I just talked about. So we have one of our members, Mazzara. We have as well Heidi from Invest Ottawa, and we have Karla Briones, who you do all kinds of incredible things. You're a serial social entrepreneur. But I'm going to let the three of you introduce yourselves from here for everyone who's watching.
Yeah, so my name is Karla Briones, and as you mentioned, I am an entrepreneur, but I actually like to introduce myself as I'm a mom and I'm an immigrant first, and then I'm an entrepreneur, and I own several businesses in brick and mortar, so your traditional type of businesses, and recently I'm working behind the scenes to launch kind of like a social enterprise as well, the Immigrant Entrepreneur Academy.
It's really exciting.
Yeah, so it's like an online community to help educate and mentor and scale immigrant businesses in Canada.
Amazing. And Karla, you're actually one of our funders for the Founders Fund, so thank you so much for your support. And I'm just curious if you wouldn't mind sharing with us why it was so important to you to be a funder.
Ooh, that's a great question. I think it's sort of, as I mentioned, I'm an immigrant, and I got so much back from being in this country. And people around me and in my community, they've been very supportive of everything that I've done. And I just felt that it was the right thing to do, to support and to give back to at least a community that I believe in, that has been very supportive all throughout my immigrant journey here in Canada.
Thank you so much for your support. And also, Karla is a mentor in addition to being a funder, specifically helping to support our newcomers that are members. And so that's such an incredible, important space, and we're really grateful to have you provide so much value in that area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing. Okay, so Heidi, and so you're a mentor for the Founders Fund. If you'd like to introduce yourself and your background and why it was important for you to become a mentor.
Definitely. So I have the pleasure of wearing a couple hats at Invest Ottawa, our local economic development agency here in the nation's capital. And I'm the head of HR for Invest Ottawa and Bayview Yards, which is where Invest Ottawa is actually located. But I also get the pleasure of being able to be in the HR leadership and culture, it's a mouthful, but the core HR leadership and culture advisor for all of our programming. So I get to work with Karla, and she's one of our advisors at Invest Ottawa, and I get to engage with single founders straight through to the scale up community, which is they're scaling their businesses at 50+ million. So a lot of HR puzzles, from one end to another, but helping them on their journey has been really gratifying, and I love being able to manage both of those roles. I always say sort of 3 or 4 hats, but it's been really great. I had so many reasons to join. It was easy, actually. Of course, it was natural. Of course, I would want to engage. Being a champion and helping to empower other women in meeting their goals and reaching their dreams, any way I can do that. I think we all resonate with that. To me, it was an easy win. And then to parlay my experience and my own passion for human resources and creating great cultures and building great businesses that make an impact in our community. There were so many natural wins there that it was really amazing to be asked to kind of contribute. And I think one of the things I look forward to is being able to help early on create some amazing foundations so that naturally the puzzles that you're going to face, and you're going to face some. I say puzzles, and I steal that from my husband, is that puzzles can be solved. And that's great wisdom that I'd like to pass on to some of the entrepreneurs I work with. Challenges seems to be a bit more of a negative kind of spin on it. I call them puzzles, and whenever I think about that, even in the work that we're doing, puzzles can be solved, and I think that's one of the things I hope to parlay to the mentors that I get to work with.
Thank you so much for being a mentor. I think you're going to provide so much value in those very important areas that you just shared. Thank you.
Thanks.
And Rebecca.
Yeah, so I'm an entrepreneur, part of the Founders Fund. as a member, and my business is called Calita Intimates. It's a women's intimates line. So I just actually launched, very fresh, in December, so still very much in the early stages, but I sell women's underwear that are sustainable, good for our planet, healthy for us, and all sort of the moving pieces for the business are based here in Canada. So that was a challenge, and that's probably why it took me so long to eventually launch, but that's been my focus, and I stuck to it, rolling out the business. So really excited to sort of share some of the parts of the business that I wasn't expecting to face, and really have been enjoying so far being part of the Founders Fund community, and being able to sort of learn and build with all the other members, part of the group as well. So
It's incredible. In such a short period of time, you went headfirst full-time into the world of entrepreneurship, which is incredibly brave and exciting and probably terrifying, I assume, at the same time. But that's incredible. Thank you so much for being here. And how has it been being a member so far, even though we just kind of kicked off memberships not long ago?
It's been great. When I first signed up, it was, like you mentioned, a no-brainer, just because I felt very kind of alone in the entrepreneurial journey, especially in this industry of sustainable fashion. It's kind of specific, and I didn't really have anyone who shared the same passion, but also a network of women that I could lean on from time to time. So that I didn't realize that would be the most valuable piece of all of the moving parts of the fund, but really that's what I've enjoyed so far a lot, especially since, like I said, it's very much the early stages. So that's been really exciting, and just having, like we talked about, the Slack channel with a select group of women.
Hundreds of us.
Hundreds of
That's
you.
incredible.
But also, you guys did a great job at curating a small group that really speaks to what I'm going through in a similar stage of the business that I'm in, but also in similar industries where I couldn't find people in my industry. So that was really unique, and in Ottawa as well. So I can meet with them, we can brainstorm together, that kind of thing. So that on its own has been so valuable.
That's really good to hear. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks.
So for those who are watching, you can't quite see, but we have a very intimate group of members that have joined us from Ottawa, which is incredible. I know we'll probably have some behind the scenes stuff that we'll splice in here, but if you hear some laughter in the background or some aha moments, those are some of our members who've been kind enough to join us today. Okay, so to kick things off, so Karla, we talked about the fact that you specialize specifically trying to support newcomers, and as a Canadian-Mexican entrepreneur, can you elaborate a little bit on why it was so important for you to pay your success forward and help support specifically, this niche, for lack of better words, of entrepreneurs?
Yeah, it all starts with my dad, believe it or not, with both my mom and my dad, but specifically my dad. He is a foreign-trained veterinarian, and when he came to Canada, his credentials were invalid. So he had to go through the process of recertifying, and he, in Mexico, he was an entrepreneur. He actually owned several veterinarian hospitals. But when he came here, I always joke, he didn't drive a taxi because the gas station called first. Okay. You can laugh, it's okay. So eventually he ended up recertifying, and much later he ended up opening a clinic. And unfortunately, he opened something that had 13 years later had to be restructured because he did it wrong, and hiring the legal help and hiring the accounting help to fix all of his mistakes that he didn't know what he didn't know back then, put his retirement in jeopardy. Which kind of sucks for someone like my dad gave up, or my family gave up everything back home to give us a better life and a better chance. So when I saw my dad's phase of disappointment, that's when I realized I need to do something so that phase doesn't happen again anywhere. And I researched and see if anybody was doing that, and there was not that much help. And I started 2 years ago, so it's been a work in progress. So it was just sort of, it's very personal.
Right.
And I just want to make sure that, the face my dad made when he realized
To see those struggles.
the magnitude.
So you've experienced them on a personal level in your own family, and I can only imagine how much that's driven you to want to help be a part of the solution for others.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm doing, and I'm teaching, and I'm trying to put together and curate an online community that I wish my dad would have had, or that I wish I would have had when I was starting in business as well.
Which is incredibly important because, and I don't know the statistics offhand, but as I understand, there are more and more newcomers and immigrants that are starting businesses, and you know, it's important that we're setting up the support systems to ensure that they're successful.
Yeah, there was a recent BDC survey, and actually in 2018, 40% of all small businesses that started were started by newcomers.
That's incredible.
So it's a BDC
Right.
survey. So it's like
There's a need.
I need
Yes.
to help.
That's incredible. It's extremely valuable work that you're doing. It's wonderful. So Heidi, I'm sure working with Invest Ottawa, you come across all stages of entrepreneurs. You hear the good, the bad, the ugly, the struggles that come with it. And so what advice would you give to more earlier stage businesses that are just kind of starting to get off the ground? I know it's a very ambiguous question intentionally, but just based on your experience, what would you share with someone, one piece of advice? It's really just trying to get off the ground.
It's a really important question. I recently met someone who was considering entrepreneurship. So we had this amazing opportunity to talk even before they sort of made the leap of, you know, leaving their full-time job to follow their passion. And that was the thing that back to what you were saying earlier, you know, for me, I think, and I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm sort of an entrepreneurial spirit, if I could say, and that is what definitely drives me in being around such amazing talent where they take those risks and they go on that journey, and I want to do everything I can to support them on that. Passion and purpose are two words that come to me. I think, and it's related to entrepreneurship. I also think it's related to any work that we pursue in our lives. You know, being able to find passion in what you do and then also getting purpose from it. And I think entrepreneurs know that it's a journey, and there are going to be bumps in the road. There are going to be the good, the bad, you know, the unpleasant. And I think it's easier when you're on that journey, when you're really passionate about what you're doing and it gives you purpose, to be able to navigate that. And I think that, you know, one of the biggest questions, I ask this question all the time, and some of the entrepreneurs will look at me a bit of a deer in the headlight, but I know their wheels are turning when I'll say to them, you know, would you do this for free? And when immediately they say, I would do this for free immediately, I know they've got that passion, this is giving them purpose. I think sometimes, you know, we find, or I've engaged folks where I think they're following more a paycheck as opposed to their passion and purpose. And that is okay. I think that I'm certainly open to that, and I think that if you've got success and you can see that, and maybe eventually over time it becomes your passion and it gives you purpose, I think that the journey is a little bit less bumpy when you get up every morning and you go, I would do this for free, and this is where I should be, and I'm sure some of the entrepreneurs in the room could add to that. That would be my early kind of advice.
That's great. That's actually remarkable advice and highly aligned with what I try to share too when I'm asked a similar question. And I think you really hit home this idea of passion and purpose, and this idea of like, would you do it for free? Because we're in an era right now where entrepreneurship is very glamorized. You know, it's almost over-celebrated and over-glorified in some ways. I think there's a huge misunderstanding of what actually goes behind the curtains of entrepreneurship, and I like the Wizard of Oz analogy of like, it all looks beautiful, yellow brick road on the outside, but if you open the curtains, it's a lot. It's a lot emotionally, mentally, physically, the risks that entrepreneurs take. And so I think those are really good questions and good call out. Like, if you have the right purpose for your business, even when the times are hard, it'll hopefully carry you through. And that's so important. That's more important than the money, of course. Yeah, incredible. Okay, so Rebecca, so you're a very new entrepreneur, which is so exciting, and your product line is beautiful, by the way. I still have to purchase a couple pairs.
Okay.
I'm excited.
I got you
about
ready.
it. Oh, great! I'm excited. So being a new entrepreneur, what would you say are some of your the biggest surprises that you've experienced so far that you just didn't expect?
Yeah. So I mean, there was about a year's worth of work leading up to my launch. So that's like a year of expenses and stress and not glamorous at all. So that, I don't think I was expecting to be working for a year before I could actually sell anything. So I think that was a bit of an eye-opener. I planned to sort of launch in 6 months thinking, okay, this is a simple business. I've got a designer, I've got a manufacturer, let's roll out the product. And things come up, and you hear of businesses that always get, okay, our launch is postponed. Like we know that happens, but we never think it's going to happen to us. So that was a bit of a struggle. Also, we kind of work towards these North Star sort of end goals, and for me it was launching. So once that happened, obviously there was a lot of excitement. I was making sales, friends and family were very supportive. But then you hit that, once that wave's done, and you're like, okay, like now I'm an entrepreneur, now
We're the sales.
now I need strangers to buy my things,
Yes.
and I need to be strategic in who I'm collaborating with, and I need to be a thought leader in this industry. So that was something I wasn't really prepared for, and I was just working so hard towards that launch. And while it was successful and I learned a lot, I think always thinking of the next thing is really important. It's something that I think we get so caught up in, that big fancy launch, we don't realize that there is other things that have to happen. And when's the next wave coming? What's that next exciting thing that will keep us going? So that was a bit of a struggle. But yeah, so
You mentioned something interesting. You mentioned that you felt like you had to be a thought leader, and I'm curious if that was pressure you put on yourself or pressure people put on you because you're in the sustainable fashion industry, which is a very challenging industry to be in general, not just in today's political climate, but in general.
Yeah, so for me, I wanted to be putting out content because the underwear that I'm selling, there's a lot more to it. They're good for us, they're good for our planet, they're made locally. There's all these moving pieces, but for me, I knew that in order to be able to articulate that, I needed to be able to have some really solid content. So for me, it just seemed like a part of the business, which makes sense, and it helps with my search and things like that. So on paper, being a thought leader made sense for the sake of the business. But what I did find was articulating the business to people who aren't as familiar with sustainable fashion. Like I found myself really educating them.
Yeah.
I went to this incredible textile conference in New York right when I started, and I learned so much about fibers and what women should be wearing and what's breathable and what's recyclable and how we're creating fabrics out of nature, which is mind-blowing. So for me, it was exciting for me to want to educate others. And so while it was originally part of the idea of launching my business and being a thought leader, because that's going to check the boxes, I find it exciting to be able to educate others on sustainable fashion. And I'm learning that there's a growing network of people talking about it, but probably not enough. So yeah, that's...
And I imagine too, you have a bit of at least it's just my personal opinion, but I feel like there's a bit of a gap between consumer education of what goes behind sustainable fashion. People want and expect sustainable fashion, but they don't understand why they have to pay for it or why it's so expensive.
Exactly.
And so that must be a really interesting battle.
It can be. Like the underwear are priced at $28 a pair, and some people are like, whoa, like I can buy
5 for
10.
$25.
Like the Senza has like
Yeah.
bundles, but so sometimes I find myself trying to justify the price, and yeah, it can be challenging. But when you can explain to someone that you're wearing it's like your most intimate garment, and it's biodegradable and it's healthy for you and all these things, then they kind of realize. But there is a bit of an education gap, I think, there. And for me, I've incorporated Calita intimates because I want to be able to expand to other things, but underwear was kind of the original vision, and I hope businesses start rolling out all sorts of clothing that are thoughtful this way and conscious. So that's kind of the end goal, and yeah, I enjoy sort of talking about it and educating others. So
That's great.
There's that passion.
It shows 100%.
I've been like at home at my desk, haven't talked in a long time, so this is really
So for this year, the theme of International Women's Day is around, gender equality and women's rights, essentially. And so I really do think that it really is about gender equality. And obviously there are still huge struggles with women in business when it comes to equality, even greater struggles for women who have their own businesses. Someone was mentioning, I was on Best Auto the other day, it was at a luncheon I was at, but long story short, she was sharing that I couldn't even secure a loan without my husband co-signing. I'm like, I've actually been there too. And I actually didn't realize that is part of the gap. I just thought I wasn't good enough on paper. But this is actually a very common problem, for example, one of the many challenges. And so I'd like to hear from each of you. What do you feel are some, you're giggling, you're like, oh, I can write a laundry list. Amazing. So I'd like to hear what you feel are some of the biggest challenges and barriers that women in business are facing.
Well, for myself personally, or in general?
In either or, you know, give a personal example, because I think I find those so relatable. I don't know about everyone else here, but at least for me personally, and then in general too, if you like.
Yeah, so when I started my first business, pet food store, Global Pet Foods, that was like almost 11 years ago. And I was the one, like I was the face, and I was doing the operations and the hiring and the ordering and inventory and trying to learn all of these things. And then it's a very heavily male-dominated industry, believe it or not. The behind the scenes, like all the products and the inventory and like all of the fulfillment side of things, is very, very heavily male-dominated. So sometimes we would get sales reps come into our store, and they would ask to speak with the manager, and I'm like, you're speaking with the manager. It's like, no, well, can I speak with the owner, please? And I'm like, I'm the owner. Oh. And it was just like that, like shocked by A, that I'm a woman, and B, that back then I was very young. And it was just, and at the beginning, like I would be treated like almost dismissively, that I was just like a store attendant, and then the moment that I said, no, I'm a woman, and I'm the owner, it would be a complete shock. And it's funny because I'm normally like a very chirpy person and very, very bubbly and whatnot, and I learned to not be like that over time. When I was when I was working in the business, now I'm working on the business, which is cool, but when I was working in the business, I learned to be this like pit bull. And I learned to, be rough around the edges and actually detrain myself or untrain myself from being this, happy-go-lucky kind of nice person, because otherwise my voice wouldn't get heard.
It's too bad you felt like you had to do that, because I feel like that removes a bit of your authenticity in the process.
It did, absolutely, 100%. So, and it was tiring too, because I was being this person that I normally was not. And if I needed